Welcome to Leadership Unlearned. Here in this podcast, we examine leadership. When we speak about leadership, we're not only speaking about a role in an organization, we are inviting you to take up your leadership mantle wherever you are. How about being the leader of your family or in your community, in your place of worship, or even in your local sports team? Leadership is what we need right now. And so I'm inviting you to be the leader wherever you are for the community or system that you want to serve. Then this podcast, Leadership Unlearned and Reframed, we are inviting you to discard what you think leadership is or what you know about leadership. And we want to offer a new perspective, a new thought. We want to evoke and provoke your emotions and your thoughts. And because we're taken away, we're not going to leave you hanging. So we are offering you to reframe leadership. Leadership is not about other people. We want to reframe that self leadership. It begins with you. So, as always, I have an exciting guest, and this guest is special. I'm just going to say that outright. Her name is Nori Jabba, and many other things, she is an author. But just in case she forgets to remind you about that, she is an author. So, Nori, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, it's such a pleasure to be here and be part of this Gestalt experience. So, yes, I am an author. I wrote a book called Keeping Your Seat at the Table, and that's actually my second book. My first book was my what I call my pet project, and that was a self-publishing exercise on Amazon about my dog that we rescued a Doberman in 2020 during COVID. And for her 1 year anniversary, I wrote a book, and her name is Nessa, and the book is called Happy Ness with Happyness. And then it's just a play on words and photos of her. And then the proceeds go to the rescue organization that we got her from. So kind of fun. So that's my second book, is Keeping Your Seat at the Table, written for women primarily, but honestly, it can help men too. And, I was in my 50s and wanted to go back to work. I had been a consultant and nobody would hire me. I could not find a job, and not an uncommon experience for women in their 50s. And so I had to really step back and look at what's wrong here. And so I stopped job hunting and wrote a book about the experience and really reframed my whole concept of what it means to have a seat at the table. And through that process, I got a job, and all my dreams are coming true essentially. But it was quite a journey to get there. And then I also have a third book, but I wrote a chapter in that book. It's a compilation written by 35 women, and my chapter is on mastering your voice, something near and dear to me because I've never liked my voice. I really haven't. And so through this process of writing the book, Keeping Your Seat at the Table, I did an audio version of the book. And boy, if you don't like your voice and you record an audiobook, that is quite a journey, let me tell you. But that book, Mastering Your Voice, I did learn to, I'm still learning. It's a work in progress, learning to love my voice. And I should note too that I have an identical twin sister, and she and I have the exact same voice. We don't look that much alike, but we sound identical. So whenever I see myself on Zoom or like this podcast, I kind of freak out a little bit because it's like my twin sister is talking and sitting there with me. So I'm never alone, right? But that's my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that. And thanks for sharing that with us. And so I guess the piece that resonates with me is finding your voice, loving your voice. And then you wrote a book about your voice, basically, because not being able to get a seat at the table and then getting the seat at the table. And of course, there is the ageism, there is the sexism. And I
Yes.
guess I'm curious, really curious, how did you do that?
Yeah. So it was an evolutionary process. When I stopped job hunting, I actually reached out to the HR director of one of the companies that didn't hire me. And I was I was famous for coming in second, right? You get really excited. I got this. Oh, you came in second and we chose the other person. It happened so many times. And then sometimes I never even got a response. But I reached out to this HR director and said, I'm writing a book. Would you have coffee with me and talk to me about why it's so hard for women, middle-aged women, and I wrote the book for 40 and up because ageism starts much earlier than your 50s. But women over 40, why is it so hard for us to get jobs? And lo and behold, she said, yes, I'll meet with you. So I drove an hour, and the place was an hour away that I would have been working for. So, it was probably just as well. Things happen for a reason, right? That commute would have done me in. The job I did end up getting was a walk, 5-minute walk from my house. So it all worked out. But we sat and had coffee, and she just really opened up to me. And she told me, well, one of the main things is that women, middle-aged women, don't always listen. And she wasn't just speaking from her own experience. She was speaking from the hiring managers giving her feedback, right? So she was the messenger. But boy, did that rub me the wrong way. It actually made me really angry. Like, what? How can you say that? I don't want to hear that. And, I didn't do this, but that's kind of what I felt like doing, like almost getting up and walking away, like we're done. How can you say we don't listen? I listen. But I took to heart what she said. And I thought, yeah, maybe I'm not such a good listener. Maybe I need to do some work here. And I share this in the book, but one of the main takeaways was that women, when they get to a certain state in their career and have all this experience under their belt, and they're still fighting to keep that seat at the table, at least for me, I did stop listening to others. I had to get my opinion out there. I had to share my experience. I had to demonstrate my value to make sure that people knew that I had something to offer, right? To keep my value that way. Instead of sitting back and really absorbing and listening to what was going on. So through that experience, that's what I took away from it. And I vowed, okay, I'm going to really try to be a much better listener from now on. And when I'm sitting in a group conference at a table with lots of men, I will jump in because I'm looking for because they'll talk over me the whole time. This has happened so many times. But now I sit back and I try to do both, right? I make sure that I spend conscious time listening. So that was an early part of the journey of just really understanding listening as being a good leader and keeping my seat at the table. So that was like one of the key things. And I'll let you
Yeah,
give me
before you move on,
feedback.
my mind is blown. I would say that because I'm just thinking about that transition because as young women, we want our voice to be heard.
Yeah,
And so we ask, we may seem a little strident or we're around a table, we want to butt in because we don't want the guys to speak over us.
right,
We ensure that our voice is there. And it seems like we need to be aware of when our voice is already there and we need to switch.
yes,
So put our voice into the room, yes. And put your voice in. I mean, there's so many other rules I'm thinking about that when you listen, you could feed back what you're hearing. You
that's
could
right,
feed back what it's sounding like. It feed back what it feels like, which adds so much more value than us putting another voice.
right,
And it makes sense. And then there's a part of me that's saying, will I be heard? Will I be heard? Because we're so accustomed being spoken above.
that's
So
right.
that's a real balancing act. So of course, how do you balance the two?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you touched on it. What makes somebody a good listener in a room with other people? There's so many different types of listening that we can get into, listening to your body, listening to the world around you, listening to your mind and your spirit and all of that. But when you're listening to another person, repeating what they're saying, acknowledging what they're saying, did I get that right? are you saying this? And then, offering your own 2 cents is fine, but people want to be heard, and they know they're heard when you repeat back what they have said in some way or another, or taking that, and taking it to the next level. But I think that's what I was missing. I just wasn't doing that. Did I do that in my interview? Maybe. I have no idea for that job. I really thought I had it. It would have been a great job. But what I have now and the path that I took, I am so much happier. You can't imagine myself doing that job now. But yeah, listening is a huge part of it. And I think as leaders, we don't listen enough to the people in the room. We think that leading has to be inspiring by the words that we say. But if you listen to what they're saying and provide that feedback, that they then give you the space to share more.
Yeah, and what I'm reflecting on is the suppression of the ego.
Yeah,
And we as women usually associate ego with men, right? And we do have egos. I mean, that's part of the composition of an individual. And there's a point in time which we really need to listen and say to our ego, it's okay, I'm here already. We no longer need to fight.
yeah,
So I think part of it for me is what's coming up for me is that self-acceptance and that belief that we are enough and that we have earned our space at the table. So we can now be gracious and give up the fight because we will be heard once we listen to other people and they realize that we are hearing them.
right.
That's
Well,
kind
you
of
just
like,
said a word that I'm going to say the word trigger, but I mean it in a good way.
mhm.
Last June, I went to a conference in San Diego for women's leadership. And I sat at a table with these 8 other women, 9 other women. And we were just talking and getting to know each other. And the woman next to me told me about her daily practice of saying her 3 words. And she chose 3 words to kind of frame her life and the essence of who she is. And she says them every morning. And so, as an exercise, we all came up with our 3 words
Mhm.
and my 3 words, and I still say them every day. And the whole conference was worth it because of this woman sitting next to me, not on the agenda, not one of the speakers, to come up with these 3 words. So my 3 words are grateful, open, and enough, which is the word you just said.
Mhm.
And so I am grateful for all of these things in my life. I think having that positive attitude is so important. So gratitude or grateful. Open, and I struggled with what is this, what is the perfect word? And I came up with open because I am open to learning, open to evolving, open to change, open to listening, open to growth, open to learning lessons from things that don't work out the way I planned. And then enough is really, really important because I recently left a 28-year marriage where neither of us felt good enough for the other person. And enough means I am enough. I am good enough. I am strong enough. I am smart enough. I am thin enough. I'm always trying to lose weight, right? I am beautiful enough. All of these things, your self-interest, your sense of security, your confidence, I am enough. And so I try to say this mantra of these 3 words every day, but letting go of the ego, as you said earlier, and just knowing that you are good enough is so important to keeping your seat at the table. You're not fighting to get a seat. You're already there. It's just, and that's the essence of my whole book. You're already at the table. You are at the head of the table. So you're going to fill the table with your support network to be enough for yourself.
I mean, like that's the whole interview there, right? In a nutshell. I just, I feel so at peace hearing you share that. Yeah, I feel very, yeah, I just feel the peace and the surrender.
Yes, surrender.
Yeah.
That's a great word.
Yeah. Because as you were thinking, I was thinking of what are my three words? And I guess the word that I came up, the one word that stood out to me is surrender, because the control, which makes us talk, 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 not listen.
Right?
So having, a lot of what you're saying there reminds me of us trying to figure it out and being in control of a situation when if we can surrender, we can really begin to see what is emerging in the field. And we can trust that what is emerging in the field will work for us.
Yeah. What are your other two words?
Um, Abundance,
Mm,
that is akin to the openness because it's about seeing the abundance, not just in terms of the material things, but that mindset that
yes.
wherever I go, it will happen, and wherever I am is the place for me to be. That sense of abundance. And I guess the other word that's coming up for me is opportunity.
Mm,
So what is the opportunity to live the way that I want to live with all the constraints that can be self-imposed or imposed on me by others? So the abundance, the opportunity, and the surrender. And I think both of those things emerge from my ability to surrender.
mm.
I can surrender, I can be abundant because I'll see it everywhere. And then the opportunities will be obvious.
Yeah.
So
I love how fast you came up with your three words. That's wonderful. It's there, right? It's
yes,
just putting it in that framework.
yeah.
So, one of the things I want to share with the book is, and it's so relevant to what we've been talking about with our three words, is our sense of purpose. And when I was not finding a job and I was applying for all these jobs, I was applying for jobs that I felt would be good for my ego.
Mm,
That I had this trajectory that I had put myself on and goals that I told myself I have to attain by a certain age. And I wasn't there. I wanted to be a CEO or C-suite leadership and prove to myself and the world that I was worthy, right? And that was sort of my purpose, and that's what drove me when I was looking for a job. I have to get to the top. And in writing the book and stepping back, the first thing I really had to do was say, what am I doing here? What is my purpose? What kind of job really do I want? And truly, truly, I figured out that I didn't have to be a CEO to feel good about myself. I had to have a job that fueled my passion, but I had to really understand my true purpose. And through the process, I determined that my true purpose was writing. And so writing the book became my purpose, right? The job became secondary. And I was consulting, so I had a little bit of an income stream while I was figuring all this out. But I was still job hunting kind of on the back burner, and then it fell in my lap. But the job wasn't writing. The job, I worked in real estate development and helped affordable housing developers develop their projects and get their projects entitled, and did community outreach, and I also did historic preservation and did a lot of volunteering, nonprofit development and fundraising and things like that. But the jobs that I've ended up getting since writing the book are not writing jobs, although I do a lot of writing in the job. But I love my job. I work in housing for a city government, and I absolutely love it. And there is writing, but the job and my purpose are not the same thing. And that was the key to realize that my career trajectory and my purpose trajectory didn't have to be the same. And so putting my ego aside, what do I want to do? I want to write, and I need a job that provides benefits because I was planning to get a divorce and needed that stability of a regular job instead of consulting. And I have since left that marriage, and I'm on very good terms with my ex. We're both happier that we made that decision because we weren't good enough for each other, but now we're good enough for ourselves, right? But, finding that purpose and really understanding how that relates to your job. And so once I let go of that, then everything fell together, right? I let go of the ego and what it meant to keep a seat at the table in the traditional sense. And it's really what you're doing at the Gestalt experience. It's leading in your community, it's leading at home, it's leading way beyond your job.
The words journey and destination came up for me when you were talking about this. Like the book was a destination, as in I'm gonna write a book, and then it became this beautiful journey of self, where the first question that you needed to ask yourself is what is your purpose? And then the destination of getting a job also became a journey in terms of the realizations around the purpose could be served in different ways in different arenas. And I really want to just take some time and celebrate your journey and the fact that you've arrived probably at different destinations, but really just celebrate that.
Yeah,
Take a moment to celebrate that with you.
absolutely. And I want to point out too that I ended up demoting myself. I went from needing to be C-suite CEO, start a company. And it was through that process that I wrote the book, right? Because I joined an incubator program, came up with this concept. I live in Silicon Valley, so that's what we do here, right? Start tech companies. So I wanted to start this company, and I had a friend who formed this incubator group, and he brought me into the group. And it was a Gestalt experience on how to lead and make your dream come true. And it was through that I realized, I don't really want to start the company. I want to write this book, which I was doing because nobody would, I decided nobody would hire me. I'm gonna start my own company. And that's what I did. So that process of really letting go of what I thought I needed to be successful, I ended up taking a job way down at the lower level in city government because it had been on my bucket list. I have a weird bucket list. It'd been on my bucket list to work for a city, have a master's degree in urban planning, and that I got in the 90s, long time ago. But I had never worked for a city except as an intern. So not only did this job provide that security and the benefits and the regular income, there was the topic. Housing is something near and dear to my heart, affordable housing in particular. But it was a demotion. It was like a lower level job because you can't get into city government when you're not in municipal government. You can't break in at the top or even, the mid-high level. You need to work your way up. So I thought, okay, I'll get this. Hopefully they'll hire me. I'll get this job and I'll show them what I can do and I'll move up from there. And that's exactly what has happened. And because I had that confidence that I know how to do this job, I have this expertise, I have 30 years of experience, I can bring all of that to the table and show that I am a leader without being in a leadership position. So that mindset of leading where you are, I think is also key to keeping your seat at the table.
Yeah. And I love that example, and thanks for sharing that because I think that's it, right? Most of us want a title. Most people will say a demotion. Oh, hell no, I have 30 years of experience. I'm
Yeah,
not doing
exactly.
that job, right? And there you are saying that your 30 years of experience will fast track you, I guess, once you listen and once you take up your leadership mantle, wherever you are, there's a great opportunity for you to be fast tracked
Right.
because people
And
will,
there's a lot to learn too,
yeah, there's a lot
city
to.
government, and now I understand that. I always thought it was personal. They don't want me, because I had applied for jobs before and never gotten them. I was going in too high. But city government is completely different than the private sector, and there is so much to learn. I've been there more than 2 years now, and I'm still learning every single day about the systems and the software and the requirements and all of the regulatory requirements that go with being in a government entity. But there's learning every day, and I feel challenged every day. I do not feel like this job is below me. It's just the title, and it's just the prestige that goes with. And I feel so at peace with where I am, because life is hard. Your job consumes your life, but life consumes you too. And I needed time and the ability to balance what was going on at home, going through a divorce. I have 3 grown children. One of them had a head injury. I needed to be there for her. And then what happened in the last few months is my ex had a stroke and needs care and needs help. So the whole family rallied together. And I am so grateful that I'm not in a job that is 80 hours a week and all these people depending on me every day, with direct reports and departments under me. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it. So I am so grateful to be where I am, to be able to handle what life throws at me and have the strength and the resilience to be able to tackle the challenges that come with being in your 50s and aging parents and spouses that have injuries and strokes. Life happens.
And I'm just thinking about how open you are to all of these changes and flexibility.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking that surrendering to the will, not necessarily yours, surrendering whether it is that it's God's will or the will of the universe, and surrendering to that and finding peace within that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, definitely writing the book, and I didn't want to talk about religion, but God certainly as part of this journey. You're given opportunities to learn and grow and experience things that help you down the road. And one of the key chapters in my book is don't get pulled under the table. And it was about how my aging mother caused a situation that made me lose one of my major clients, the biggest one. They basically just fired me because I couldn't be there. Because my mom, I needed to downsize her and move her. She was living in a different state and had to move her near me. And that is a really tough call. She had a big house and an accumulation of a lifetime of things because she never let anything go. Never. So I say we, but it was mainly me. But that process, and I provide all these tips that I learned and things to do to get through that, which seemed insurmountable at the time. Just, tears of how am I going to get through this? To downsize this woman's house, get rid of 85% of her belongings, sell her house, find her an assisted living place, move her there, and then take care of her. It was just like, how does one do this? And I had a short window during the summer that my twin sister could help a little bit. She was moving to Europe and, had 2 kids, and it was just the hardest time of my life. But that process that I really lay out in the book, like, here is the kit to help you through this so that you never have to go through what I went through, that pain. And it is still painful, but when you have a plan to manage the process, it's like, oh, this is how you do it. Okay. But that totally prepared me for what happened after I left and after I got this job and after the book had been out for a while, and that my soon-to-be ex, STBX, soon-to-be ex, I call him, had a stroke and needed the whole family to help. And everything was put on hold, including promoting the book. And I had to stop everything in my life and even cut my work hours for 3 months to help take care of him and help support my children through this. They're in their 20s. All of a sudden they have a parent who needs everything. And it was a very traumatic time and a lot of tears, just so painful, so hard, so sad too. And he's recovering and making great progress every day. Like, his progress has been phenomenal. But I could never have been as resilient ever if I hadn't written the book and gone through this process of the lesson that God threw at me with my mom. So as much as I'm at the time I was so angry that why is this all on me? My siblings can't help. It's just overwhelming, but it prepared me for now.
Yeah, that, so many things come to mind. I guess one, sometimes we're going through a really difficult time and it's preparing us for something in the future. The second thing that comes to mind is about this book. And it sounds like it was written in a space that really has allowed you to project yourself forward. It's
Yes.
sort of like a time to reflect, a time to plan, a time to celebrate where you've been and
Mm-hmm.
the opportunities you've had, as well as the dips and the dips that you would have experienced. And it just seems like so beautiful. I know you said you didn't have time to promote the book. And I'm just thinking that maybe the purpose of the book has been so much more than
Absolutely.
promotions.
Yeah, when I first started it, I thought, oh, this is so clever and this is so awesome, and I want to share it with the world and be a best selling author and get it out there. And that didn't happen, but it did happen because the purpose of the book was to help me get my seat back at the table and then share that with other women. And if I have helped one woman, not one sale of a book, but if I've helped one woman get their seat back at the table through this journey, I'm successful. So, and it got me here, and I have goosebumps right now because it it served its purpose completely. And selling books was not the purpose. The purpose was sharing my story and my journey because so many of us, in fact, I don't know a woman on the planet that hasn't experienced some of these things when they hit a certain age. Ageism is real. And I really did research on that. And now I speak on the book, but I don't really talk about the book. I speak on ageism in the workplace and what you can do as an employer and as an employee to combat ageism. And ageism is real, and we all experience it, men and women. It is tough out there. So having a different perspective, and one of the key things that I talk about is staying relevant. And this was another thing that HR lady, that director that I met with, pointed out, that a lot of people, when they get to a certain age, kind of stop learning new things. And we have nostalgia for how it used to be, and there's so much technological change. And so, but if we don't keep up, we're irrelevant. If you don't know how to use the software that the office just installed, that everybody else, then the younger generation, my kids were born understanding what to do with their cell phones and all these devices. They know how it works intuitively. We do not. And we have to stay up on it and get the training and stay relevant, or that's it. So that was another big part of the journey, is learning to stay relevant and just being open, oh, there's that word again, to learning new things every single day.
And I wanna underscore and highlight that little bit about, people who are over a certain age in the workplace, unwilling to adapt to technology. I've seen it,
Yeah,
where people say, I have 5 more years to retire. I don't want to
right,
learn to
right.
do
Oh,
this,
I see it every day. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then too, there are people who say things like, oh, another training, I'm not doing that. And yet there is the expectation of bonuses, the expectations of salary increases because everybody's getting one, right? So I really wanna underscore that because I think there is what's the word? Can't remember the word right now, but there is a way in which we sort of get comfortable
Yes,
because but the game is a forever game, right? It's
absolutely.
constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. The values remain the same and the goalposts are being moved because technology is just faster. It's just a condition of being alive in today's world. And
Right.
I'm happy that you shared that because we need to keep learning.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'll give a perfect example, right, of tech. So actually, it was a college reunion event, and I was there with a friend of mine from college, and they were taking photos of us, and we went over, and this was several years ago, mind you. I'm not that out of it, but it was, maybe 8 years ago. And they said, oh, just scan this QR code and you'll download your pictures. We're like, what? What is that little square? And so we like, oh my God, this is mind blowing. This is so cool. It was the first time we had seen, we'd seen the QR codes, but we didn't really understand how they worked. And now you go log on to Netflix when you're in a hotel and you're scanning your phone in the hotel room, and it seems like second nature. But that is kind of a great example of being a little reluctant. That's what the young people use. What is that? And now we use it every day, and it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, and it's such a cool, great technology. And AI is another one, right? We're all scared to death of AI for very good reasons. But when I do my speeches and keynote addresses on ageism, I like to talk about AI as ageism interrupted.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And so I encourage older workers to embrace it and learn about it. And I gave some examples, and have all of the different ones out there, and there's so much more now. And use it to make yourself smarter at work, instead of asking that stupid question that you should know the answer to, but you don't want to let anybody know you don't know. So use AI. Use AI to teach yourself. It's awesome. So ageism interrupted. That's my words for AI.
I am gonna steal that. I love that because it's about leveling the playing field, right? Because I mean, we're not too old to Google something. We're
Right.
not too old to learn a new trick. And I just think that ageism interrupted, it just says it, and it's such a beautiful reframe of AI because a lot of people are scared of it. It's gonna take our jobs. But how I love that. Thanks for that. That's like a pearl, Nori. Thank you so much for that.
And it's fun. You can, and just embrace it and start using it in a fun way to help yourself learn about things you should know that everybody's talking about, software systems. I mean, AI knows everything. I used AI to see what it knew about my book. Oh my goodness. AI had read my book and it didn't pay for it, I'll tell you that. but yeah, you can use AI to really, really help you on a daily basis in your job, for workers of all ages, but particularly for older workers who are struggling to adapt to very fast moving technological changes in the workplace.
I'm guessing that this is something that you wrote about in your book as well.
So this came out after the book.
Mm,
It came out after the book, because of the book.
mm,
I touch on AI in the book, but it's exploded since, even in just the last year, right? AI has it's every single day. And if you drive into San Francisco, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, all of a sudden you see the billboards. They're all about AI, and it's just another world, right? But just in the last 12 months, it's in everybody's daily conversation. So, and we have to understand it, or it is frightening, and it's still scary because it can be used, for very bad purposes as well as good, with scammers and that kind of thing. But understanding how it works, what it's capable of, and how it can be used to benefit society will empower us.
yeah. And that I think that's a really good point for the older worker, the older, whether it's an entrant or even if you're in a job, get into that next level or get into your destination, whatever the destination is. It is something that we need to embrace. I absolutely agree with that. Now I want to go back to your book just a little
Yes.
bit. And what else can you share with us that you think like is an absolute must know for us to get that book, Keeping Your Seat at the Table? What are some other
So
steps that are there?
this one I'm really passionate about, and that is owning your age. So if you look for a job when you're older and you go to any expert to try to help you, the first thing they're going to do is tell you to try to mask how old you are. Oh, don't put the year you graduated on your resume. They'll know you're old. And if I get a resume that doesn't have the year you graduated, I know they're old, right? It's a dead giveaway. It doesn't help.
I
It
love
just
it.
like, I'm just like, of course they're old. And I'd be more likely, I'm not in that position of interviewing anybody for a position right now, but I'd be more likely to say, "Oh, put it there." I want somebody who owns their age.
Mhm.
And what I found is that owning your experience, yes, I have 30 years of experience. Don't hide it. Don't say more than five. Own it. And I think we have to stand up and say, no, that let's flip the table on that. I have gray hair. So as part of the book, and my publicist is probably watching because one interview I talked about my hair and she said, all you did was talk about your hair. Okay, but I'm going to talk about my hair. It has some gray in it, but as an experiment in writing the book, I stopped coloring my hair because I wanted to see if people treated me differently. And I talked to women who had beautiful gray or white hair. And I asked them, do you think it helps you or hurts you? And I also asked women who still dye their hair when they are obviously gray underneath, at a certain age. We all are. Does it help you or hurt you? Would you consider doing that? Would you not? And every single woman who was gray haired and in a higher level position said, it helps me. I love it. It's part of my personality and it's part of my strength and history. And so I thought, I'm going to stop and see how people treat me. And I felt like they treated me better, for sure, 100%. Now, one could argue that I had confidence building for other reasons because I was writing the book, right? But I'm never going back. And today I'm looking and there's a lot more gray than there was a year ago, but I am going to own it no matter what. And my hot French boyfriend, yes, has gray hair too,
Get that in there.
and likes my hair gray. So, but that was just owning your age is part of keeping your seat at the table. Stop hiding. It's ridiculous to think that we should hide who we are and downplay everything we can bring to the table because it makes us old. No, it makes us experienced. And I think about, the legacy companies in the country and the world, the biggest companies in the world. They're not trying to hide their age ever. What in business for over 100 years or since 50 years ago we started, they celebrate being old, right? But people, we don't. So I think that's ridiculous. And I really appreciate the cultures that value the wisdom of older people and treat their elders with respect. And we need to start doing that in the workplace. And one thing I talk about when I do my talks on ageism is speed dating. So something you can do is have these speed dating sessions with older workers and younger workers and share their wisdom. Like ask the young person to teach them something and ask the older person to teach them something and learn from each other. But owning your age is so, so, so important. So I think that's a big part of keeping your seat at the table is not hiding how many years experience you have.
Well, in this program, we often talk about unlearning and reframing, and boy, did we get it today. Because I think, especially for women, there is I wouldn't even say vanity, but there is a quest to look younger, right? Botox cells, Ozempic, everything, there's industry, laser work, oh, lots and lots of stuff that is just really geared to women keeping their youth. I mean, we look at the movie stars and they're 50, they're 60, and their cheeks are still standing and all the parts of them, right? So it's like there's this golden standard that women, regardless of our age, we don't want to look our age.
Right.
And that's what's portrayed in the wider media. And then this idea of how do you then appear as your authentic self if your age is hidden?
Right.
And
Right.
how do you establish your self-confidence if you're not confident about showing up as whom you are?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I really need to think about. I mean, I haven't had an injection, but I'm just thinking about how then do I accept my signs of aging and confidently wear them as part of my experience. I'm really muddling around. That's what's muddling around in my
And
head.
we all struggle with it because it's hard to accept that you're aging. And I went to a conference a few weeks ago in San Jose, California, a women's leadership conference, and Jane Fonda was one of the speakers. And Jane, oh my God, she's so amazing. She got up there and if you read her book, and I did listen to her book, that she actually says she regrets having some of the plastic surgery that she had because she wants to accept herself as she authentically is and was. And that's really telling to hear. And she's 86. So she got up there and said, and she stood up and got right out of her chair and stood up straight as an arrow and said, I am 86 years old. And, these are the best years of my life. And she just owns her age in just a fantastic way. I thought, gosh, I want to be like her when I'm 86. Absolutely. And the other one is Richard Branson's grandmother, who was 98 and said, that the best years of her life were in her 90s. And so embracing everything, all of your experiences in your life, the bad ones and the good ones, bring you to where you are today. And, would you change anything? I was married for 28 years. It was really hard. There were good times and bad times, and I thought about leaving for a long, long time. And when I finally did, after 28 years, I had this wonderful gift because all of my experiences led me to right here, right now. And I am so happy where I am right now. And anything that had changed, it wouldn't be that way. I don't know where I'd be, but it wouldn't be right here, right now. So I am grateful for this moment.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you, Nori.
Oh, thank you.
It's been such a like it's such a calm and peaceful moment that we're sharing.
Yes.
And just the creation of a real open space. I know you said you're a fan of Brené Brown.
Yes.
So if you were to
Book
share
is right
some,
behind me. Atlas of the Heart.
yeah, so if you were to share anything from a Brené Brown perspective about our conversation, what would that be?
So I will go back to Brené's definition of being vulnerable, because in society we think of vulnerability as a weakness, and Brené turned the table, I love that, turned the table on that definition and sees it as a strength. So being vulnerable means allowing yourself to be authentic and to be open to change and taking risks that could be good or bad outcomes. Taking those risks, but knowing that you're going to learn and grow from any of those outcomes. So being vulnerable enough to be authentic, true to yourself, to own your experience, and to take those risks, knowing that even if something bad comes out of it, you're going to learn and grow and be a better person for it. And it's going to get you to another place that could be the best thing ever. And you wouldn't have gotten there had you not taken that risk. So be vulnerable.
And can you make the link with what you just shared and your three words that
So
you
my three words again are grateful, open, and enough. And the enough one is the hug. I am enough. We are all enough for ourselves, for others. And just saying to yourself, I am enough is such a wonderful way to start the day and empower yourself.
Yeah. So I think that's a note that I want to end this conversation on. Because I feel like, I'm super grateful for your openness and your sharing today. and for sort of lifting the veil on who Nori Jabba is and your journey and your experience, and definitely offering us different frames for around ageism, around keeping our seat at the table, around titles and entry into organizations. I think those were very powerful shares for me.
And
And I,
loving your voice.
pardon?
Finding peace with your voice and loving your voice is
That's
part of
where we
that
started,
journey.
right?
Yeah.
That's where we
Yeah.
started with that voice. Yeah. And so there's so much that I wanna think and reflect on and journal on from this conversation. And really, I just really want to thank you for being here today.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
for the
much.
opportunity.
Yeah. And so, Nori, if our audience wants to contact you, how can they contact you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn. I am the only Nori Java in the world, so I'm very easy to find. And I have my own website, norijabba.com as well. So yeah, just look me up.
Yeah.
Norijabba.
And can you just flash us a copy of your book, please?
Yes. And hopefully I have it turned the right way. Yes, I
Yes,
do.
absolutely. Keeping your
Keeping your
seat at the
seat at the
table.
table. And there's that. And yes, it's available on Amazon.
Thank you so much, Nori. It's been
Thank
like
you.
really a pleasure chatting with you.
You
And
too.
we are definitely gonna look out for us on our YouTube channel. We're gonna put this up. Thank you so much.